Aditya Atoli. How are you?
How's it going, Mr. Watlington?
I'm really glad that you agreed to visit with me because all of my students, well, not all of my students, but all the people who take care of me now are former students. So hopefully I have a pretty good relationship with them. My dentist, this is his place at the Azalea House. Clayton Pauly takes care of me. I taught him. The people that sell me insurance take care of me. People that sell me cars take care of me. I even have an optometrist who is married to a former student. So now I'm, hoping you might take care of me in Congress. So it's all good. It's a nice place you have here. Aditya Atoli, for those of you listening who might wonder, who is this guy? I mean, where is he? He's from here, right? Yes, he's from here. Kind of tell us who your people are and when you were young, what you were doing here.
Yeah, I mean, so most folks probably know my mom, Dr. Chandra.
Right.
So that's how we ended up in Center.
How old were you when you arrived in Shelby County?
I remember we were in C.H. Daniels. So I think I was like maybe 8 or 9. And before that, we'd moved to like 6 or 7 different schools. So I remember my first day at C.H. Daniels because this was my 7th school by that point, but everyone was so friendly.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, the boys asked me to play football the first day during lunch.
Okay.
Yeah, and the girls are all like asking me, about my life and all that kind of stuff. And it's crazy because a lot of those kids I met that day are helping with the campaign now,
Wow.
Almost 30 years later. It's pretty awesome.
Clayton Paul, this is Azalea House. Were you in his graduating class? I know you were around the same time, but...
Yes, sir, yeah. So I graduated Center High School in 2005.
Okay.
Right.
And he was 05 as well?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. I had him pegged at 04. Was he one of those guys on that first day that you remember?
I don't remember him, but there's a lot of other folks that I'm sure you know.
Yeah, oh yeah. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. And then you graduate from high school, 05.
That's right.
I sit down with you, let's just say hypothetical, and say, well, Aditya, you're going to be running for Congress in about, 16 years. What would you have thought I was crazy, or was that something that you had entertained even back then?
Well, I would have been offended.
Oh, really?
Because I thought it was an East Texas thing. I'm not sure, but I realized the lowest jobs a person could have was a politician or a salesman. So I don't know if that's just my head or that's the culture we're brought up in. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was ridiculous, and I would have been really offended if someone had said that.
Okay.
But, so my degrees at Rice were business and government because I'd always studied how societies worked because I'd moved around so much when I was little. So I think that curiosity stuck. And so that's what I wanted to do when I graduated was I was going to go into conflict resolution in war zones, and start a business doing that, so it's going to be like a cross between government and business without having to be a politician because, I mean, that's not even a real job in my opinion.
And the one you're describing is, I wouldn't have ever thought that was a real job. And now that you pitch it to me, I'm like, wow. But again, I taught school, and so I knew what a teacher was from kindergarten. When did you have that idea? I mean, that's a pretty cool idea.
I mean, that was in college, junior, senior year, basically.
Did anybody else in your classes and you have that idea, or was that an independent thought?
Me personally, it was an independent thought, but I had a lot of friends that work in these kind of, like what they call NGOs, non-governmental organizations, that do stuff in America and across the world for different kinds of stuff like conflict resolution.
Interesting. So that's kind of where you're coming from.
Right.
That's page 2 of this program. It's brought to you by a pizzeria. You ever eat at the pizzeria?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. What's your favorite?
I mean, I like the Supreme.
Okay.
I I mean, the way, I mean, it's ridiculous. I still have memories from when I was like 9 eating that stuff, and it was so amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I say it all the time. It's a taste of home, the pizzeria. It's also brought to you by Ray Jones Chevrolet. Be sure and check out the lot. And there's, all over America, there are fewer cars on lots than you're used to seeing. But the cars that are there are still the same quality Chevrolet new cars, and pre-owned vehicles. And Marlon and Michael have always been so low pressure in their approach, and that hasn't changed with the times at all. Ray Jones Chevrolet. All right, page 3. You obviously were bothered by the course the country's going, and that's outside of political affiliation. It's just some wrong turn somewhere jogged your sense of self and sense of duty and sense of opportunity to at least stand up and either make a change or at least let everybody know a change is needed. And to decide to run for office, that's got to be a pretty loud call, because running for office, like you said, is fraught with difficulty. So can you take me back to the point where you were and what you were doing? Because you've done a lot of interesting things for a living, when you just kind of said, I got to do this.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think when I realized I had to do it was probably around, I don't know, I'd say probably 2016 when Trump got elected, because I knew, before that, I knew something was wrong. Because, so right after college, my goal after college was I was going to go to the Marine Corps, be an infantry officer, get this combat deployment experience, and then start my, conflict resolution business. But the Marine Corps took 8 years. So from 2008 to 2016, I kept applying to the Marine Corps. It took like 4 or 5 times for different reasons we won't go into, right? But so I ended up doing a bunch of these different blue-collar jobs, ranging from, building log houses to being a mechanic, to most of my time was spent being a roughneck, like all around Texas. And when I was roughnecking, I did that for years, and I realized I really loved it. And then I also realized there was a huge disconnect between what regular people think is happening in America and what my friends in DC think is happening in America. Because keep in mind, by this point, this is probably, 2013, 2016, I'd already worked in Congress for about 5 months. I just left because I hated it so much. But I have friends in the Congress, in the Senate, in the White House, in different federal bureaucracies. So I understand how they think. And then I come back to the oil field. I worked there for years, and I realized there's a huge disconnect. But I didn't realize how quickly that disconnect was going to manifest itself. And so in 2016, when Trump got elected, I realized this is another step up in that culture war, okay? And I didn't think he was going to get elected because I thought he was too brash. And I personally thought he was just another politician that was all talk and wouldn't actually do anything. But I was 100% incorrect. And I loved voting for him in 2020 because of the tangible results he got us, okay? But the problem is the core situation, the core reason that things are like they are in America right now, it's not anything the president can fix. It's something that Congress has to fix, because there's a bunch of legal and policy framework that's just not working like it's supposed to work.
Interesting. And the last statement you just made is the one that I want to visit in page 4. So hold on to that.
Okay.
Page 3 is brought to you by Aurora Concepts and Dawn Barnes and her staff. If all they did was primary care, that would be mission fulfilled. They do a very good job of it. But they go beyond that with the testing. Way before testing was just in the news. Testing's a part of the medical framework, right? They were doing it at a very high level a long time ago. The vaccines for all sorts of things. They do that, and they would take them, and still do, on the road to schools for the school vaccinations and mobile clinics, they call them. it's a very good part of a community that you kind of take for granted because you just drive by. Very glad to have as part of this show and as part of the community Aurora Conception Center. Okay, that last thing you just said, the legal frameworks that a Congress has to take care of. Right before that, you said something that might sound a little radical to folks, but it's just absolutely true. A president can't fix. And then fill in the blank. There's a lot of things president, despite all of the storm and drama and screaming and yelling and celebrations and hate-filled accusations, there's some things that are just beyond the scope of any president.
Right.
Why is this beyond the scope of a president?
Mr. Watlington, that's an excellent question, and it is the reason I'm running, okay? Because me, like most folks, my whole life, even though I understand government, I hated politics. And I would always, I would just turn off my TV when the media starts scaremongering, and when politicians start scaremongering, I would just stop listening to them. Because I know it's in their interest to get votes or get views, right? But last year, when I finally moved back home from the military, I started really researching it and started talking to, economist friends, historian friends, and there was something really, really wrong going on with the country. And I think most folks, especially around East Texas, they know this, but they just don't know exactly what is happening, right? So what's happening is very, very, very simple. The relationships between the Democrat Party and the Republican Party is exactly like a toxic marriage. Okay, exactly. So what's happening is, how do no marriage starts out toxic, right? You marry him, you like him, and the first few years, things are probably going pretty well. And then stuff starts happening, right? Real material problems, such as, hey, we have too many bills and we're starting to go into debt. Or, hey, you don't spend enough time with me, so I feel unloved. Or, hey, we are having another kid and our house needs to be bigger, but it's not. Okay, so these are real problems. So if you don't solve these real material problems and you let them fester for 10, 20, 30 years down the road, what does that relationship turn into? And you already know this, the listeners know this. Think about any toxic relationship. It starts out as discussions. A few years later, it turns into arguments. A few years later, it turns into yelling. A few years later, it turns into physical, like pushing, maybe throwing things. And then what happens after that? You see that progression, and that's what we're seeing with the American government now, which is everything that we argue about now, which is wages for middle-class people, the price of healthcare, the state of public education in certain communities. People in DC have been arguing it for decades, okay? If you go back to the 90s, you can listen to politicians, they're talking about the exact same things we're talking about now. But the problem is, because they haven't solved these material problems, the argument between the two parties has festered, and now this relationship, they're starting to yell at each other and throw things at each other. And so us, regular people, right, that work in non-political jobs, we are now hearing our neighbor, the political parties, yelling and screaming and throwing things, and now we're confused. And now we're starting to pay attention. And we don't know what's wrong, but we see that something is wrong. And this is also why you see the politicization of all these non-political institutions in America, right? So you look at media, right? Big business, big unions, the education system, universities. All these are not political institutions. They don't care which party wins or not. But the problem is, exactly like a toxic relationship, right? When that relationship turns into moral pointing at, we're not arguing about problems anymore. You are a bad, evil, immoral person that doesn't care about me. Right. When it turns into that, then if you're the family or friends of this couple, you have to pick a side, right? You can't stay in the middle, or else you will be the one hated on also.
I have noticed that. It's difficult to be in the middle these days.
That's right. So that's what's happening on a national level, is because the political parties are no longer discussing how to fix these material issues, they're now calling each other immoral and evil. And because of that, all these other national institutions are forced to pick a side. And it just happens to be that a lot of these institutions are picking the left because the left is winning culturally, right? The only institutions that are still staying with the right or nonpartisan is like civic organizations, some civic organizations, and the middle class and maybe small business.
And that is the overview as far as I know it. And you said some things that I've not heard you say just then. The toxic relationship is a great analogy. So this is a 2-day commitment. Aditya will be back tomorrow, and we will elaborate and get into some specifics as to exactly what you would do. I mean, this is the situation. You've made the bed. Now, how do you get in it and get comfortable in that and make some change? So that's what we'll talk about tomorrow. Aditya, thank you for being here, and we'll visit. And strangely, tomorrow we'll be wearing the exact same thing. That's really good.
We can just keep going.
Okay.
Can I get my breakfast?
Yes.
You want me to do anything different?